Hey, Reddit, throwaway account here because I really need some advice and to get this off my chest. My story is a wild ride and I'm still processing everything, but here goes. So I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for about 7 years. We don't have kids and we both work pretty demanding jobs. Our marriage was good, or so I thought. It started unraveling about 6 months ago, on a day that was as chaotic as the storm that would soon hit our lives. It all began during a freak hailstorm. I was driving home from work, carefully navigating through the icy chaos, when I got a call from Sarah. She told me she was stuck at McDonald's and asked if I could come pick her up. I didn't think much of it at the time, just figured she wanted to wait out the storm somewhere warm. When I arrived, I found her chatting and laughing with one of the employees, a young guy named Jake. He was wiping down tables while she sipped on her coffee. The place was almost empty, and they seemed pretty chummy. But hey, I'm not the jealous type, so I brushed it off, and we headed home. Over the next few weeks, Sarah mentioned Jake quite a bit. She'd casually drop his name in conversation, talking about how funny he was or how he always made her day better. Again, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it's good to have friends at work, right? Things took a turn when Sarah started spending more and more time at McDonald's, even on her days off. She claimed she was just grabbing a bite or enjoying the free Wi-Fi to get some work done. Still, I couldn't shake this weird feeling. It's like that hailstorm was a prelude to the storm brewing in our marriage. One day I decided to swing by McDonald's unannounced. Sarah was there, of course, sitting in a corner booth with Jake. They were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even notice me walk in. I watched for a bit before deciding to confront her later at home. When I asked her about it, she got defensive and accused me of being paranoid. She said they were just friends and that I needed to trust her. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But things didn't improve. Sarah was spending almost every evening at McDonald's, and her phone was constantly buzzing with messages. She'd step outside to take calls and would often come back looking flustered or excited. I knew something was up, but I couldn't prove it. The final straw came one night, when she didn't come home until well past midnight. She claimed she'd lost track of time talking to Jake and his co-workers after they closed up. I was furious, but she just brushed me off, saying I was overreacting. In hindsight, all the signs were there, but I was too blind to see them. The storm had already hit, and I was standing in the eye, completely unaware of the devastation around me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a twisted and tumultuous journey that would shatter my world and redefine everything I thought I knew about my wife. After that night when Sarah didn't come home until after midnight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The following weeks were a blur of suspicion and tension. Sarah was growing more distant, spending even less time at home and more time with Jake. She'd even started lying about her whereabouts, saying she was working late or catching up with friends when I knew she was at McDonald's. One particularly stormy night, the weather outside was a perfect match for the storm raging inside me. I decided I'd had enough of the lies and the secrecy. I needed to know what was really going on. So I drove to McDonald's, hoping to catch her in the act. When I arrived, the place was closed, but I noticed Sarah's car parked out back. My heart was pounding as I approached the building, the rain and hail hammering down on me like a relentless reminder of the turmoil in my life. I peeked through the windows and saw the lights were still on inside. I could see shadows moving around, so I decided to try the back door. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I quietly slipped inside and made my way towards the sounds of hushed voices and laughter coming from the employee area. As I got closer, I could hear Sarah and Jake talking, their voices low and intimate. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew what was happening. I rounded the corner and there they were, locked in a passionate embrace, their lips pressed together as if they couldn't get enough of each other. The sight hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Sarah and Jake were so caught up in their moment that they didn't even notice me standing there, drenched and devastated. When they finally did notice me, Sarah's face turned white as a sheet. She pulled away from Jake, stammering excuses and apologies, but I didn't want to hear any of it. I turned and walked out, the sound of their voices fading into the background as the storm outside swallowed me up. I drove around aimlessly for hours, trying to process what I'd just seen. How had it come to this? How had I missed all the signs? I felt like a fool for trusting her, for believing her lies. By the time I got home, the rain had let up, but my mind was still a chaotic mess. Sarah wasn't home when I arrived. She must have stayed with Jake, or maybe she was too ashamed to face me. I didn't care. I was done with her lies and deceit. The next morning, she came home, looking disheveled and guilt-ridden. She tried to talk to me, but I wasn't having any of it. I told her I needed time to think, and that I didn't want to see her for a while. Over the next few days, I struggled with my emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to try and salvage our marriage, but another part of me was furious and hurt beyond measure. I couldn't just let this go. I needed to confront her, to get answers. Finally, after days of silence, I sat Sarah down and demanded the truth. She admitted everything. She confessed that she and Jake had been hooking up for months, that it started as harmless flirting but quickly escalated into something more. She told me how they'd sneak off to the McDonald's restroom for quickies during his shifts, how they'd meet up outside of work whenever they could. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been living a double life right under my nose. She begged for my forgiveness, swearing it was over and that she wanted to make things right. But I couldn't trust her anymore. The damage was done. I decided to move out for a while, to give myself some space to think. As I packed my bags, Sarah cried and pleaded, but her tears meant nothing to me. I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out what I wanted to do next. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of Sarah's deceit. There was more to come, and I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to cover her tracks and continue her wild escapades. After moving out, I stayed with a friend for a while. I needed to get away from Sarah and the constant reminders of her betrayal. It felt good to have some space, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened and what I should do next. My friend suggested I file for divorce immediately, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that step. During this time, Sarah bombarded me with texts and calls, begging for another chance. She claimed she'd broken things off with Jake and was willing to do anything to save our marriage. I ignored her messages, still too angry and hurt to consider reconciliation. But part of me couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to swing by McDonald's to see if Sarah was really avoiding Jake like she said. As soon as I walked in, I spotted her. She was there, but Jake was nowhere in sight. It looked like she was actually trying to distance herself from him. Maybe she really was serious about making things right. Feeling a bit hopeful, I decided to give Sarah a call. We agreed to meet up at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, she was already there, looking nervous and remorseful. We sat down, and she immediately launched into apologies, promising that she was done with Jake and that she wanted to work on our marriage. I listened, still skeptical but wanting to believe her. We talked for hours, hashing out everything that had gone wrong and how we could possibly move forward. By the end of the conversation, I was exhausted but slightly more optimistic. Maybe we could fix this after all. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Sarah and I started going to couples therapy, trying to rebuild our trust and communication. It was tough, but we were making progress. I started to believe that we might actually make it through this, but then the other shoe dropped. One night I decided to surprise Sarah by picking her up from work. She'd been putting in extra hours to make up for her absences during the affair, or so she said. When I arrived, I noticed her car parked out front, but the lights inside McDonald's were off. I figured she was just wrapping up, so I waited in the car. After a few minutes, I saw movement inside. The back door opened, and out stepped Sarah, with Jake right behind her. My heart sank. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Fuming, I stormed inside and confronted them. Sarah's face turned pale, and Jake looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't give them a chance to explain. I just told Sarah to come home and pack her things. It was over. She tried to follow me, pleading and crying, but I was done. I couldn't believe I'd fallen for her lies again. As we drove home, she kept trying to explain, saying it wasn't what it looked like and that they were just talking. But I knew better. When we got home, I watched as she packed her bags. She was hysterical, alternating between sobbing and shouting at me for not trusting her. I told her it was too late for that. She had her chance, and she blew it. Sarah moved out that night, and I filed for divorce the next morning. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was the end of an era, but at least I was finally taking control of my life again. But of course, Sarah being Sarah, she didn't disappear quietly. A few days after moving out, she started working at KFC. I thought it was a strange move, but whatever, it wasn't my concern anymore, or so I thought. One evening, while grabbing dinner at a nearby restaurant, I saw her. She was with the owner of the KFC, looking way too cozy for my liking. My stomach churned as I realized she'd already moved on to her next conquest. I confronted her later that night, demanding to know what was going on. She laughed in my face, calling me pathetic for still caring. She admitted to sleeping with the KFC owner, bragging about how easy it was to get whatever she wanted from him. I couldn't believe the audacity. This woman had no shame. Sarah's behavior was spiraling out of control, and I was done trying to keep up with her lies and manipulations. I cut all ties and focused on getting my life back on track. But as you can probably guess, Sarah's drama was far from over. After filing for divorce, I tried to distance myself from Sarah as much as possible. I needed to focus on healing and moving on with my life. But Sarah wasn't done wreaking havoc. Her new job at KFC seemed to bring out the worst in her. One night, I got a call from a mutual friend. They told me Sarah had been causing all sorts of drama at KFC, including sleeping with the owner. Apparently, it wasn't just a one-time thing. They were carrying on a full-blown affair. I was furious but not surprised. Sarah had a knack for creating chaos wherever she went. But the real kicker came when I found out she'd been spreading lies about me to our friends and family. She told them I was the reason our marriage fell apart, claiming I'd been abusive and unfaithful. I couldn't believe it. After everything she'd done, she had the nerve to turn the tables on me. I decided to confront her about the lies. I called her up and demanded a meeting. We met at a coffee shop, and as soon as I saw her, I could tell she was ready for a fight. She smirked at me, clearly enjoying the drama. "Why are you spreading lies about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lies? You mean the truth?" She shot back, her eyes glinting with malice. "Sarah, you know damn well I never laid a hand on you or cheated. Why are you doing this?" She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Because it's fun, and because I can. People believe what they want to believe, and right now, they believe me." I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, ready to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "You're not going anywhere," she hissed. "I'm not done with you yet." I pulled away from her, my heart pounding. "We're done, Sarah. You can play your games with someone else. I'm finished." I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her behind, but I knew this wasn't the end. Sarah was like a storm that never fully passed, always brewing on the horizon, ready to strike again. The next few weeks were a blur of court dates and paperwork as we finalized the divorce. Sarah's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She'd show up at my apartment unannounced, banging on the door and demanding to be let in. When I refused, she'd scream and shout, creating a scene until the neighbors called the cops. One evening, I came home to find my apartment trashed, furniture overturned, pictures smashed, and Sarah's signature touch, a note pinned to the wall with a knife. It read, "This isn't over." I reported the incident to the police, but there wasn't much they could do without proof. It was my word against hers, and Sarah was a master manipulator. I knew I had to be careful. Things took an even darker turn when I heard rumors that Sarah was trying to get the KFC owner, Mark, to fire me from my job. She claimed I was harassing her and making it impossible for her to work. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was trying to ruin my life, and I was running out of options. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I gathered all the evidence I could, texts, emails, and witness statements from friends who knew the truth. I filed for a restraining order against Sarah, hoping it would put an end to her madness. But Sarah, being the cunning woman she was, found a way around it. She continued to spread lies about me, trying to turn everyone against me. It felt like I was constantly battling a shadow, one step behind in a game I never wanted to play. The final straw came when Sarah showed up at my workplace. She made a scene, accusing me of stalking her and threatening to have me arrested. My boss, who knew about our situation, tried to intervene, but Sarah was relentless. "Get him fired, or I'll go to the police!" she screamed, her face contorted with rage. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Sarah was determined to destroy me, and I had to protect myself. I decided to move to a different city, far away from her reach. I needed a fresh start, away from the chaos and toxicity. Leaving wasn't easy, but it was the only way to regain my sanity. I packed my bags, said goodbye to my friends, and set off for a new beginning. It was time to put Sarah and all her drama behind me. But as you can probably guess, even a new city couldn't keep Sarah away for long. There were more surprises and betrayals in store, and I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to keep me in her twisted game. After moving to a new city, I found a decent apartment and started a new job. It felt good to leave the chaos behind and focus on rebuilding my life. For the first few weeks, things were peaceful. I was slowly finding my footing and even making new friends. It seemed like I had finally escaped Sarah's toxic grip. One day, while I was settling into my new routine, I received a message from an unknown number. My heart sank when I saw the text. "Miss me yet?" It was Sarah. Somehow she had found me. I tried to ignore her, but the messages kept coming. She'd send taunting texts, pictures of us from happier times, and even photos of her with Mark, the KFC owner. It was like she was trying to remind me that she still had control over my life, no matter how far I ran. I blocked the number, hoping that would be the end of it. But Sarah wasn't one to give up easily. A few days later, I came home to find a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep. The card read, "You can't escape me. Love, Sarah." My blood ran cold. How had she found my address? I decided to go to the police again, but without solid evidence of harassment, there wasn't much they could do. It felt like I was stuck in a nightmare with no way out. I couldn't believe how far Sarah was willing to go just to keep me in her twisted game. Then, one evening, as I was leaving work, I saw her. She was standing across the street, watching me with a smug smile on her face. I froze, unsure of what to do. My mind raced with questions. How long had she been in town? How did she find me? I decided to confront her. I crossed the street and demanded to know why she was there. She just laughed and said, "You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" I was furious. "Sarah, this is stalking. You need to leave me alone." She stepped closer, her expression darkening. "I'm not done with you, and I never will be. You owe me." "Owe you? For what? You're the one who destroyed our marriage," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. "You owe me for everything I put up with, for all the lies and deceit. I'm going to make sure you never forget me," she hissed. I turned and walked away, feeling her eyes boring into my back. I knew I had to take action before things got even worse. I contacted a lawyer and started the process of getting another restraining order, this time with the added evidence of her stalking me in a new city. But Sarah wasn't done causing chaos. A few days later, I got a call from my new boss. He said someone had called the office claiming I was a dangerous individual who had been stalking her for months. My stomach dropped. Sarah was trying to get me fired again. I explained the situation to my boss, who thankfully believed me and assured me they wouldn't take her accusations seriously. But it was clear that Sarah was escalating her tactics, and I needed to find a way to protect myself. As the restraining order was being processed, I started noticing strange things happening around my apartment. Small items would go missing, my mail would be tampered with, and sometimes I'd hear noises outside my window at night. It was unnerving, and I knew it was Sarah's doing. One night, I woke up to the sound of my front door being unlocked. My heart raced as I grabbed a baseball bat and crept towards the door. To my horror, I found Sarah standing in my living room, holding a spare key I didn't even know she had. "What the hell are you doing here?" I shouted, holding the bat up defensively. She smirked, unfazed by my anger. "I told you, you can't escape me, you're mine." I called the police, and they arrived quickly to escort her out. This time I had solid proof of her breaking and entering. The restraining order was granted, and she was warned to stay away from me. For a while, it seemed like she had finally gotten the message. But Sarah's grip on my life was far from over. She had one more card to play, and it was a move so shocking that it would change everything. After the restraining order was granted, things started to calm down. I finally felt like I could breathe again. Sarah's constant presence in my life had been suffocating, and I was grateful for the respite. I focused on my job and started to enjoy my new city. One day, out of the blue, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. My hands shook as I opened it, wondering what new torment she had in store for me. The letter was short but impactful. She claimed to be pregnant and said the baby was mine. My heart stopped. This had to be another one of her twisted games. But what if it wasn't? I had to know the truth. I immediately called her, and to my surprise, she answered. "What is this about, Sarah? Are you really pregnant?" I demanded. "Yes, and it's yours," she said, her voice calm and steady. "How can I believe you after everything you've done? You could be lying just to mess with me again." "I'm not lying this time. You can do a paternity test once the baby is born," she replied. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, fear. I didn't know what to believe, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that she was telling the truth. If there was even a chance the baby was mine, I had to be involved. Over the next few months, Sarah kept me updated on her pregnancy. I insisted on going to the doctor's appointments with her to ensure she wasn't lying. To my shock, everything checked out. She was indeed pregnant, and the timeline matched up. The months dragged on, filled with tension and uncertainty. Sarah seemed to relish having control over my life again, but I couldn't let her antics affect me. I had to stay focused on the potential responsibility of becoming a father. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah went into labor, and I rushed to the hospital. Seeing her in the delivery room, vulnerable and scared, was surreal. It was a stark contrast to the manipulative, conniving woman I had known for so long. The baby, a little girl, was born healthy. As soon as I saw her, my heart melted. She was perfect. I couldn't believe this tiny human might be my daughter. We did the paternity test immediately, and the waiting period was excruciating. When the results came in, my world turned upside down. The baby was mine. I was officially a father. With the paternity confirmed, I had to figure out how to co-parent with Sarah. It wasn't going to be easy, given our history, but I wanted to be there for my daughter. I vowed to protect her from Sarah's toxic influence as much as I could. Things were relatively calm for a while. Sarah and I managed to maintain a civil relationship for the sake of our daughter. I saw my baby girl regularly, and those moments with her became the highlight of my life. But Sarah, being Sarah, couldn't keep the peace for long. She started using our daughter as a pawn, manipulating visitation schedules and making unreasonable demands. It was exhausting, but I refused to let her win. My daughter's well-being was my top priority. One night, while I had my daughter for the weekend, Sarah showed up at my apartment, unannounced and hysterical. She banged on the door, screaming about how I was trying to take her baby away. I opened the door, trying to calm her down, but she was beyond reason. In the midst of her ranting, she let slip a shocking revelation. Mark, the KFC owner, had dumped her. She was furious and desperate, looking for someone to blame. She accused me of ruining her life, of making Mark leave her. "None of this would have happened if you had just stayed with me," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. I was stunned. "Sarah, you're the one who cheated, lied, and manipulated. This is all on you." She lunged at me, and I had to physically restrain her to keep her from hurting herself or our daughter. I called the police, and they arrived quickly to handle the situation. They took Sarah away, and I was left standing there holding my crying baby girl, wondering how things had gotten so out of hand. The next day, I filed for full custody of my daughter. I couldn't let Sarah's unstable behavior endanger her. The legal battle was long and grueling, but eventually I won. Sarah was granted supervised visitation, but I was awarded full custody. It was a bittersweet victory. I had my daughter safe with me, but the journey had taken its toll. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and wary of what Sarah might do next. But for now, I could finally focus on building a stable, happy life for my daughter and myself. The storm had passed and I was ready to move forward. After winning full custody of my daughter, life started to feel more stable. I settled into my role as a single father, and it felt good to finally have some peace. Sarah's visits were supervised, and while she still tried to push my buttons, she didn't have the same power over me anymore. One day, as I was picking my daughter up from daycare, I ran into an old friend, Lisa. We hadn't seen each other in years, but we quickly caught up. It turned out she had moved to the same city a few years ago and had been through her own share of ups and downs. Lisa and I started hanging out more often, and before long, we realized there was something more than just friendship between us. She was kind, understanding, and great with my daughter. It felt like a fresh start, and for the first time in a long while, I was genuinely happy. But as you can probably guess, Sarah found a way to disrupt this newfound happiness. She had always been good at sensing when I was moving on, and couldn't stand the thought of me being happy without her. One afternoon, during one of her supervised visits, Sarah pulled the social worker aside and started crying, saying she was worried about our daughter's safety. She claimed that Lisa was a bad influence and accused her of things that were completely unfounded. The social worker had to take her seriously and investigate, which meant more stress and scrutiny for me. When I confronted Sarah about it, she played innocent, saying she was just concerned for our daughter's well-being. But I knew it was just another one of her manipulative tactics to try and control my life. The investigation came back clean, and Lisa was cleared of any wrongdoing. But the damage was done. Lisa, although understanding, was visibly shaken by the ordeal. It put a strain on our relationship, and I could see the toll it was taking on her. One night, after putting my daughter to bed, Lisa and I had a long talk. She admitted that while she cared deeply for me and my daughter, she wasn't sure she could handle the constant drama with Sarah. I couldn't blame her. I hated that Sarah's toxicity was affecting yet another part of my life. We decided to take a step back, to see if some distance would help. It was heartbreaking, but I respected Lisa's need for space. I wasn't going to let Sarah ruin this for me, but I also couldn't force Lisa to stay if it was too much for her. As I tried to navigate this new challenge, an unexpected ally came into the picture. Mark, the KFC owner, reached out to me. He had heard about the custody battle and the trouble Sarah was causing. He apologized for his part in the whole mess and offered to help in any way he could. I was skeptical at first, but Mark seemed genuinely remorseful. He shared that his relationship with Sarah had been a disaster, and that he wished he had never gotten involved with her. He even provided me with messages and evidence of Sarah's erratic behavior, which could be useful in court if she continued to cause problems. With Mark's help, I felt more confident in dealing with Sarah. It was ironic, teaming up with the man who had once been part of the chaos, but life has a funny way of bringing unexpected allies. One day, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang. It was Lisa. She sounded upset and asked if she could come over to talk. I agreed, worried about what she might say. When she arrived, she looked exhausted. We sat down, and she took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot," she began. "I care about you and your daughter so much, but this situation with Sarah is more than I can handle. I'm sorry, but I need to step away for a while." My heart sank. I knew this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. "I understand," I said quietly. "I don't want you to feel trapped in this mess. You deserve peace and happiness." We hugged, and she left. It felt like a part of my heart was leaving with her. But I knew I had to focus on my daughter and on protecting her from Sarah's chaos. Life moved on, and I threw myself into being the best father I could be. Sarah's visits remained supervised, and I kept a close eye on her interactions with our daughter. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Months passed, and I started to find a new rhythm. My daughter was growing and thriving, and I felt proud of the stability I was providing for her. Mark and I maintained a cautious alliance, sharing information and keeping each other informed about Sarah's antics. Then, out of the blue, Lisa reached out again. She had taken some time to reflect and realized she missed me and my daughter. She wanted to give our relationship another chance, despite the challenges. We met up and talked things through, agreeing to take it slow and see how things went. It felt good to have her back in my life, and I was hopeful that we could make it work this time. But as always, Sarah had one more twist in store for us. She showed up at my apartment one night, drunk and belligerent, demanding to see our daughter. I refused, and she went on a tirade, yelling and causing a scene. Lisa was there, and she called the police. They arrived quickly and took Sarah away, but the incident left a dark cloud over the evening. I realized that as long as Sarah was in the picture, there would always be drama and chaos. Still, I was determined to protect my daughter and give her the best life possible. With Lisa by my side, I felt stronger and more capable of handling whatever Sarah threw our way. After the incident with Sarah showing up drunk, I realized I needed to take even more drastic measures to protect my daughter and my sanity. I filed for an emergency hearing to address Sarah's increasingly erratic behavior. It was clear she was unstable and potentially dangerous. The court date arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Lisa was by my side, providing much-needed support. Mark had agreed to testify about Sarah's behavior, which was a huge relief. As we sat in the courtroom, I could feel the tension in the air. Sarah arrived looking disheveled and defiant. She glared at me as if this whole situation was my fault. When the judge called the hearing to order, my lawyer presented our case. We had evidence of Sarah's drunken outburst, her constant harassment, and her attempts to sabotage my life. Mark took the stand and corroborated everything, painting a clear picture of Sarah's instability. When it was Sarah's turn to speak, she tried to turn on the waterworks, claiming I was alienating her from her daughter and painting her as a villain. But the judge wasn't swayed. The evidence was overwhelmingly in my favor, and Sarah's antics only served to dig her deeper into a hole. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody and restricting Sarah's visitation rights even further. She was ordered to attend mandatory therapy and substance abuse treatment if she ever wanted to see our daughter again. It was a victory, but a bittersweet one. I didn't relish seeing Sarah hit rock bottom, but my daughter's safety was my top priority. With the court's decision, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Sarah's influence on our lives was finally diminishing, and I could focus on giving my daughter a stable and happy upbringing. Lisa and I grew closer, and our relationship blossomed despite the chaos that had surrounded us. But just when things seemed to be settling down, another twist emerged. One day, I received a letter from Sarah's therapist. She had started attending sessions as ordered by the court, and her therapist believed she was making genuine progress. The letter was a request for me to consider allowing supervised visits again. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to believe that Sarah could change and be a good mother. On the other hand, I couldn't forget the pain and turmoil she had caused. I discussed it with Lisa, and we decided to give it a chance but under strict conditions. The first supervised visit was tense. Sarah looked healthier and more composed, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She was trying, but trust was hard to rebuild. Our daughter, still young, was mostly oblivious to the drama, happily playing and chatting with her mother. Over the next few months, Sarah continued her therapy and attended her supervised visits. Slowly, she started to show real signs of improvement. She was more stable, more responsible, and genuinely seemed to be working on herself. I still kept my guard up, but I was cautiously optimistic. One day during a particularly good visit, Sarah pulled me aside. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to be better," she said, her voice earnest. "I want to be a part of our daughter's life in a positive way." I nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to see where this went. "Actions speak louder than words, Sarah. Keep doing what you're doing and we'll see." Meanwhile, Lisa and I continued to strengthen our relationship. She was a rock for me during the hardest times, and I was grateful for her presence in my life. We talked about our future, and it was clear we both wanted to build a life together. As Sarah's progress continued, I allowed for slightly longer supervised visits, always careful to maintain boundaries. Trust was slowly being rebuilt, but I never let my guard down completely. I couldn't afford to. Then came the day that shook me to my core. I received a call from Sarah's therapist, who had some shocking news. Sarah had been diagnosed with a serious illness. She had been keeping it a secret, but the therapist felt it was time I knew. Sarah didn't have much time left. I was stunned. Despite everything, I never wished harm upon her. I agreed to meet with Sarah and the therapist to discuss what this meant for our daughter and the future. The meeting was emotional. Sarah looked fragile, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear and regret in her eyes. "I'm sorry for everything," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I messed up, but I want to make things right before it's too late." I didn't know what to say. The woman who had caused me so much pain was now facing her own mortality. We talked about her wishes, about our daughter, and about the future. It was heartbreaking but necessary. From that point on, things changed. Sarah's visits were still supervised, but they took on a different tone. They were filled with a sense of urgency and sadness. I wanted my daughter to have good memories of her mother, so I made sure the visits were positive and loving. As Sarah's health declined, she and I found a fragile peace. We weren't friends, but we were co-parents trying to do right by our child. When Sarah passed away, it was a surreal mix of relief and sorrow. The chapter had finally closed, but it was a tragic ending to a tumultuous story. In the aftermath, I focused on giving my daughter a stable, loving home. Lisa and I grew closer than ever, and she became a wonderful mother figure to my daughter. Life started to feel normal again, and the storm that had once consumed us faded into a distant memory. The months following Sarah's death were a whirlwind of emotions. I had to navigate the complicated feelings of grief, relief, and guilt. My daughter was too young to fully understand what had happened, but she knew her mother was gone. I did my best to explain things to her in a way that made sense for her age. Lisa was my rock through all of this. She supported me unconditionally, helping me cope with the loss and take care of my daughter. She never pressured me, just let me grieve in my own way and time. Our bond grew stronger as we faced this difficult period together. One day, while sorting through some of Sarah's things, I found a letter she had written to our daughter. It was a heartfelt, apologetic letter, expressing her love and regret. It was clear she wanted our daughter to know she was loved, despite everything that had happened. I decided to keep the letter and give it to my daughter when she was old enough to understand. Life slowly began to find a new rhythm. I focused on work, being a good father, and nurturing my relationship with Lisa. We moved in together, creating a warm and loving home for my daughter. It wasn't always easy, but it felt right. One weekend, while Lisa and I were cleaning out the garage, we found a box of old photos and memorabilia from my life with Sarah. There were pictures from our wedding, vacations, and everyday moments that seemed so far away now. As we sifted through the memories, Lisa suggested we create a scrapbook for our daughter so she could have a tangible connection to her mother. It was a cathartic process. We laughed and cried, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the bad. It helped me see that, despite everything, there were moments of happiness and love in my past. It was a part of my story, and it had shaped who I was. As time went on, the pain of Sarah's betrayal and the chaos she brought into my life began to fade. It didn't disappear completely, but it became a distant echo rather than a constant presence. I realized I had to forgive her. Not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to the anger and hurt was only holding me back. Lisa and I decided to get married. It felt like the right step forward, solidifying the new chapter we had created together. The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends and family. My daughter was our flower girl, and seeing her smile filled me with hope and gratitude for the future. On our wedding day, I took a moment to remember Sarah. I didn't dwell on the pain she caused, but rather, I acknowledged the role she played in my life. Without her, I wouldn't have my daughter, and I wouldn't have grown into the person I was. In the months that followed, life continued to improve. My daughter flourished with the love and stability we provided. She had Lisa as a wonderful mother figure, and I made sure she knew about Sarah and the love she had for her. We read the letter Sarah wrote together, and it helped my daughter understand that, despite everything, her mother cared for her deeply. Lisa and I decided to have a child of our own. It was a decision we made with joy and anticipation. When our son was born, it felt like a fresh start, a new beginning filled with hope and love. Our family felt complete, and the future looked brighter than ever. As I reflect on this journey, I realize how far I've come. From the depths of betrayal and heartbreak, I found love, forgiveness, and healing. I learned that life can throw unimaginable challenges your way, but it's possible to come out stronger on the other side. My story isn't over, but the storm that once dominated my life has passed. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned and the people who have stood by me. I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next with open arms and a hopeful heart. Life had finally settled into a comfortable rhythm. My daughter was thriving, Lisa and I were happily married, and our son brought so much joy into our lives. It felt like the calm after the storm, and I was grateful for every moment of peace and happiness. One day, while sorting through some old papers, I found a letter from Sarah's attorney. It was part of her will, something I hadn't paid much attention to in the chaos following her death. The letter stated that Sarah had left something for our daughter, to be given to her when she was older. Curious, I contacted the attorney and arranged to pick up the item. It turned out to be a small box, sealed and covered in dust. Inside, I found a collection of Sarah's personal belongings, a journal, some jewelry, and a few trinkets. There was also a letter addressed to me. I sat down and opened the letter. It was the final piece of the puzzle, a heartfelt apology and explanation from Sarah. She wrote about her regrets, her struggles with mental health, and how she had hoped to make amends before it was too late. She asked me to forgive her, not for her sake, but for the sake of our daughter, so that she could grow up without the shadow of bitterness hanging over her. Reading the letter brought back a flood of emotions. I realized that despite everything, Sarah had tried to do the right thing in the end. She wanted our daughter to know she was loved, even if she couldn't always show it in the right way. I decided to share the journal and some of the more meaningful items with my daughter when she was ready. It was important for her to understand her mother's struggles and the love that lay beneath the chaos. I hoped it would help her find closure and peace. As time went on, our family continued to grow stronger. My daughter became more confident and happy, secure in the knowledge that she was loved by all the important people in her life. Lisa and I worked hard to create a nurturing environment for both our children, filled with love, laughter, and support. One evening, as we were sitting together after dinner, my daughter brought out the scrapbook we had made of Sarah. She had added some new pages with drawings and notes about her feelings. It was a beautiful, poignant reminder of how far we had come. "Dad," she said, looking up at me with big, serious eyes, "I miss Mom sometimes, but I'm glad I have you and Lisa and my little brother." I hugged her tightly. "We all miss her, sweetie, and it's okay to feel that way, but we're here for you, always." Lisa joined the hug and our son toddled over, adding his little arms to the embrace. It was a perfect moment, filled with the love and connection that had sustained us through the hardest times. In the months and years that followed, I continued to honor Sarah's memory in small ways. We celebrated her birthday by doing something special as a family, and we talked openly about her when our daughter had questions. It helped to keep her memory alive in a healthy, balanced way. Looking back, I realized that Sarah's final act of leaving those letters and gifts was her way of making amends. It didn't erase the pain or the mistakes, but it showed that she cared and wanted to do right by our daughter. It was a reminder that people are complicated, and even in their darkest moments, there can be light. As I close this chapter of my life, I'm filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, the strength found, and the love that has carried me through. Life will always have its challenges, but I know now that I have the resilience to face them. Thank you, Reddit, for being with me on this journey. Your support and advice have meant more than you can imagine. Here's to new beginnings and the hope that comes with them. This is the end of my story, but the beginning of a new one. I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next, with my family by my side and love in my heart.